Hello, this is Jon Speelman with the video version of my latest column, number 217. And let's check I am turned on, aren't I? It is turned on, yes, it's recording. I've called it Trappers Trapped or Otherwise. I started off, just as an aside really, talking about the old database structure of the old version of ChessBase CB3 and how it had a problem with en passant captures, and this made it enormously difficult to decipher. It was much harder than if it had been a true move generator. It was just an aside really, but also I spent some months doing this, writing some utilities and things, and I didn't go into too much detail because I could have gone on and on. And I can't find any of them. You could make games in which you played a5 takes h6 en passant, and the pawn would process across the board to capture on h6, which was rather splendid. Or was it? Maybe it was h5 takes a6 that really worked well. I don't think anyway that the latest versions of ChessBase would have any truck with such nonsense, but I couldn't find the databases anyway, or my database of this nonsense, to show you or otherwise. Anyway, my starting point was this diagram down here, which is MVL to play against Alireza Firouzja. Firouzja's just played rook b6 takes b2. Probably thought he had quite a reasonable game, but he'd actually allowed, I don't know when he saw it, but he'd allowed quite a dirty trick. And maybe you can look, if you haven't seen it before, and see if you can see the trick. And it's this, well, I'll say now, the move is c4, which forces the exchange of rooks, after which you can go, the bishop is trapped. You can save the bishop a couple of ways, but while you're doing so, you manage to capture it, which is a big deal really. You manage to take it for the knight, and then you got an ending with rooks and bishops, in which white has very dangerous kingside pawns. And it turns out it should be winning according to our lords and masters. And somehow c4 looked a bit like a move that could be taken en passant, especially in the old ChessBase file. The move bishop a2 takes c4 en passant would definitely be a good answer, though it's illegal for two reasons, obviously. However, you'd have to do quite a lot of fiddling to get a position which you go knight takes c3 en passant, rook takes rook, knight d1 check. Anyway, it's all a fantasy, and I'm going to go now to my database, starting, what is this? It is starting here, I think, actually. I moved it down. I've got this first. So this is the game MVL against Firouzja, and it is the Berlin Wall endgame. I'm not an e4 player, I'm not an e4, e5 player, so I know nothing about it apart from what I've gleaned by watching people play it, from which I have understood that it's enormously theoretical nowadays, and it's very, very sharp actually, despite the exchange of queens. There are lots of other pieces on the board. Anyway, on they went. They played the Berlin endgame. Of course, people nowadays generally don't play castles, actually. They play d3 much more often, or bishop takes c6-y things. d3 is the most common, I think. Knight e4, d4, this thing which Kramnik introduced against Kasparov in the 2000 World Championship match in London. When I say introduced, it had been played before, but Kramnik guessed that Kasparov wouldn't like it. It wouldn't suit him to have a position in which the queens were off so early, because Kasparov's big shtick was that he could checkmate you from any position by opening fire. So I don't know, they played some more moves. I think bishop d7 was better, and it was better previously. And I guess That gets the bishop off prise, but after this move, he'd missed c4. But, or perhaps he had from afar anyway. These got exchanged. Now, black can extract the bishop either by playing b5 or by playing a4. If b5, rook a1, bishop takes, king takes, is pretty bad. You're getting a passed f pawn very, very fast. And it turns out that this is lost, basically. I mean, okay, I'm saying it's lost, and clearly you just have to count it out, but the f-pawn probably is going to win. What they actually did, they did this one. Now he went f3, rook to there. He's managed to be as annoying as humanly possible. So he has won this pawn. Bishop goes to g7, ready to go to f6. Bishop b5 now, and here he should have played king g4, and it's not. King g4 rook to there was a better way to do it, and apparently is winning. Again, it's not easy to be sure about this, but you can imagine that the passed f-pawn is going to be pretty enormous. What actually happened was that they got to a rook ending. Okay, there's a threat of mate in one, but black sees it. I think it would have been more dangerous for white for black if white had played bishop f6 here. Looks a bit scarier. And the problem here is that you just sit. If you go rook h6, and if you go rook h6, you just take it, and you hem the white king in, and so he drew. Well done, Alireza. He had a very good tournament, in fact, didn't he? After losing to, was it Caruana in the first round? So this is from Romania. It's from the Superbet. You can see up there. Okay, and eventually he gave up and did something. I don't know, what did he do? They agreed to draw. Okay, so that was the first one, and it set me thinking about en passant captures, and rather than a real game, I'm repeating something that I've shown you here before, which is with a knight rider. A knight rider is a piece that goes along knight lines, like a rook or a bishop. It doesn't just go one knight move, it keeps them going till it hits something. So the knight rider on d3 can go to f2 or h1, or f4 or h5, and to the normal squares a knight goes to. It can't jump over the c5 pawn. It has the same constraints that a knight does, that if it hits something in the middle, so it can't go to b7, and it can't go to f7. But the solution to this, it's a mate in 2, is knight rider to h1 check, so it goes via f2 to h1. From h1 to g3 to f5, it's given check to the king on e7. So the only defence is to play f5 to block that check. Then you play e takes f6 en passant, and you're checking by the rook on e1, the pawn on f6, and the knight rider on h1. So it is in fact treble checkmate. Not ever possible with normal chess pieces, because you can only open 2 lines at once, basically. But this way you open a third line, the knight line as well. Not of great interest, it's just something I had here previously, I just thought en passant. So then I started thinking about trap pieces, because of this move, trapping the bishop, though it was possible easily to extract it, but at the cost of being exchanged. And my most famous game with that is my game with Lev Sarkis. I've given it here before. I'm going to turn the board round and just talk a little bit about it. I'm not going to go into huge. So we did this one. It's a known line. Not a bad system, actually, for black, I would say. But white does have the 2 bishops. Somewhere around about here I have to draw, which is perhaps a bit cheeky, because I had this feeling I wasn't that happy with the position, and I was geeing myself up to do something ridiculous. Don't know why. I remember the room in Hastings. It was a little room. We weren't playing in the theatre. It was it? It can't have been at the Yelton Hotel, surely. Hadn't we gone past that? Maybe it was at the Cinque Ports. Anyway, so that's, I don't know. And here I teed myself up and I played the faintly ridiculous move knight a2. And I know once I'd thought of it, I found it very hard not to do it. Unfortunately, it's completely unsound. I thought it was just somewhat unsound. There's actually only one way to refute it. And the notes here, I had it in my book of best games, and I also did it in whenever I couldn't find which column it was actually in. I found it in the database of previous Agony columns, but they aren't in order completely, and I couldn't find where I'd used it. Anyway, I did apparently. He went rook c4, which is okay. Is that right? Bishop didn't occur to either of us at the time. As far as I can, looking at the game a decade later, it seems to be a reasonable move. I think he went rook c4. So knight e5, does it say? But after rook e4, it's no good for some reason. There's a problem. There's basically quite a... I don't know if you could have gone in that position. Presumably you should go king f8 there then. Surely king f8 is better. I'm going to turn the engine on actually and ask whether king f8 is a playable move. Hello, Stockfish. So king f8 doesn't work either for some reason. Whereas king f7, rook a1, rook a1, rook d1, rook takes a2, rook c1, f4, knight g4. I mean, basically you're being kicked around too much. h3, and I seems to want to play f5, which is horrible. Because, yeah, the basic problem is that once the knight's moved, you're gone. He gets in king f2. So that doesn't work. I'm not surprised. I don't know if it's any... Sorry, that's Control A rather than Control S. Yes. Anyway, this is what happened. And there is some way... Joel Benjamin pointed out that the refutation, he did this... Bishop b4, knight to there, bishop to there, knight to there. That doesn't work. Rook a1, knight b3, rook takes, rook to there. Threatens knight d2 check, rook e4, check, king to there, f4. And you have bishop b4 at the end. So it wouldn't matter if the king was an f8 or f7. There's still bishop b4. So this was unsound, sadly. But most of my best games are unsound. And I discussed also with knight a2 how you'd put it. Question mark, exclamation mark, question mark, exclamation mark. I don't know. Up to you. What actually happened, b3 is a mistake, and now my horses are stomping around. And this is annoying. So we got to this position, and actually with my knight trapped, it's still a draw, this position, for quite a long time. I found yesterday, I'm doing this on Sunday, July the 4th, I discovered that bishop b5 is a mistake, but bishop c4 is okay. And the reason is, when I interrogated the great engine, the point is that in this position, the one ending, that after you have rook e6, that's the point. Whereas if the bishop's from c4, you don't. That is precisely the point. That with the bishop and c4, you can't play rook e6. Okay, that's something I discovered yesterday. You know, these things, you look at a game again. He did bishop d3, which is a very stupid move, really, because it lets me take the exchange, after which I'm not going to lose. Because previously I had losing chances. Is rook d5 the best move? I thought I was winning here, but actually he could still have played bishop takes... It doesn't play bishop takes a5. He goes king f3, knight c3. This is quite bad. What happened? He went bishop to there and offered a draw, which I refused. But here he should have gone rook d1 and swapped rooks, and then because my pawns are all on dark squares, it's actually a draw, this ending, which is interesting. I hadn't realised this at all until the engine just went beep and told me. But he went rook g1, which is a mistake, and now he's losing, basically. That makes things worse, because after king f8 I'm hitting his rook. I'm threatening f3 check. I'm threatening the rook. If he goes... If rook takes h7 check, well, you can try king takes pawn, but he'll certainly lose. Yeah, it's very simple. Bishop b2, rook d3, and he resigned. And the reason he resigned is, if he doesn't do anything, I go f3 check and knight c2 check and rook d1 mate. If he does go f3, then I play rook takes b3 and I can play chase the bishop. He doesn't even get to an ending with a rook and bishop and not very many pawns against a rook and knight and lots more, because after bishop b2, because after f3 takes there here, can't go to b2, can't go to e5 because of a pin and a skewer respectively. Bishop f6, knight d5, and the bishop's trapped. Doesn't have enough squares, only 6 squares in that diagonal, which apparently in this case is not enough. So there we are. So one of the best games in my life, not a sound game, but fun. And I mean, I must say I'm proud of playing knight a2, even though it's totally bonkers. I had another game with Lev where I sacrificed a piece for 2 pawns, but that was much more reasonable, and that I also won actually as black, but again it was unsound. Now I went on to trap pieces, and 2 very famous games with trap pieces. So the first one is Vachier-Lagrave. This had notes by Kasparov, which he put into his book of great predecessors, and they were originally in English and German. I've taken out most of the German when I've noticed. There's probably some German. I mean, there's no reason you shouldn't have German as well. But makes it maybe slightly more readable to just have one language. So this is a old system. You have to take e takes d4. If you go castles, take is definitely bad. Take. Bishop b4, takes. I was doing this with somebody yesterday, so now I know. Here, can try rook d4 as well. Here, check. This has all been played many times actually. You just take it. And go bishop g5. And you win material. You can do slightly better, I think. You can go... I mean, you can just move your knight and just lose the exchange, but it does win. So that was a very well-known trap in the 1908, does it say? But I mean, at the beginning of the last century, it was very well known that you had to give up the centre at that point. But black has got a reasonable game. I don't know. I mean, I don't know what the best moves are here. c4 is a reasonable move here as well, I think. I think this is perfectly reasonable with a very slight advantage. And this is Kasparov saying, I think Taras would have been pretty happy, but your guy suddenly went rook e5, which he wouldn't have thought about. He wasn't that sort of player, really. Now, queen c7 isn't completely impossible, I think. Knight, of course, if knight c7, rook to there, and that is impossible. But queen c7 isn't ridiculous. Oh, that's right, you go takes, takes, rook c8, and you get an equal ending as black. Because you have to take now before rook c7 happens. So, yeah, you have to go queen d7. Takes, takes, takes. I'm not sure which pawn you take. Definitely perfectly playable for black, maybe better for black. I can't be bothered to ask the engine. Okay, so he's gone rook to there, now he goes rook to there, just annoying white. And Kasparov thought this was a bad move. Actually, the engine doesn't mind too much. Now, apparently, you could just go play almost any other move and leave this b-pawn on prise. Presumably, you get enough play. Or there's the b-pawn on prise. White's b-pawn. He went knight b6, which is actually not a great move. f4, that's trapping the rook. And Taras just wouldn't have believed this. That's the base. Now, Kasparov gave b3, which looks very natural. And people think, of course, why not? But you play the ridiculous knight d5. And it's quite okay for black. Maybe already better for black. Knight e2, knight c3, I think, happens. Really irritating. So I guess he saw that. c3 first, a5. Trying to weaken white's queenside. And now just c4 would have been fine. b4 is a bit overexcited. Rook c4. Yeah, he's trapped the rook, but c3 is loose, and you got the hit c5. So it's going to be hard to win material. Even if you did win the exchange, it might be fairly ruinous by the time you've done it. Went g3 to defend this. Preparing c5. I think if c5 at once, then knight b5. Yeah, when you're hitting, threatening both knight takes d6 and knight a3. And here, Taras got excited. He went to there. a3 was the best move, just holding stuff. And here he went bananas. He went rook takes d6. So this is a very famous position. If you haven't seen it before, then please have a look and see whether you can find black's next move. Sorry, it does actually say at the very bottom of the screen. It does say the move actually, doesn't it? I don't know if it appeared on your screen. I'm sorry about that. Because I don't see very well. I didn't realise it was there. But the best move, queen g6 is good, but the glorious move, rook takes f4, completely destroys white. And the irony indeed is that the rook, which was trapped, has now stomped out. It's absolutely pouring outside my window. And there's supposed to be the Chess Fest in Trafalgar Square today, so I hope it won't be absolutely foul weather the whole day. Anyway, I don't know if you can hear the rain. And he tried this. Queen checks here, check here, check here. And Taras was so annoyed that he carried on playing. I mean, he must have been absolutely furious to think about playing this position on. Foaming at the mouth with fury. I mean, obviously you could play, I don't know, anything you liked. Obviously white gets, I don't know what he expects. Is there some sort of stalemate trick? If queen takes d4, queen takes f7, queen g1, h4, would that defend? Would that really, really defend? So if you went, I mean, obviously he just plays some move, and the guy resigned. If here, I suppose he was hoping for this, because I think this may be a draw now. Oh no, of course it's not a draw, because after you play queen g6 check, the king can go out to g4. What a load of nonsense I'm talking. What a load of nonsense. Okay, that's a famous game. Basically, Dr. Taras, the logical academic chess player Dr. Tarash completely destroyed by the mercurial, cussed, stubborn, brilliant Dr. Lasker. He was a doctor surely in mathematics or something. Wasn't he? I don't know actually whether he was. The last game is the famous game Spassky-Fischer. Very famous game where Fischer trapped his own bishop. And we've never really been told what happened there. The interesting thing is that it was perfectly okay to trap the bishop. This is a Nimzo. Apparently, I think if you take on c5, maybe you take on c3 and on c4, on c4 and on c3. And make a mess of the pawns. Anyway, they played these moves. Spassky, was the first game, he was just playing chess. He's just in time to go bishop d7, because if bishop f6, rook d7, the rook hangs on a1, which makes the position equal. Spassky just played some moves, not particularly good ones. Bishop a4 is mildly annoying. I assume if rook takes knight, you play bishop takes bishop. So you just took and took. I mean, obviously there are many ways of playing this position. He went b5, which is if you go h3, then black plays b5, fixing the queen side with a very slight advantage. I think it's a draw because white's only got one weakness, really. But I mean, still, you can see he played b5 to take some queen side, and Fischer very, very famously played bishop h2. Allowing g3 and perhaps missing that when the bishop goes out by g1 to f2, then bishop d2 still traps him. Yeah, there's also, this doesn't work apparently, that's quite close. No. Yeah, it comes to the same thing, doesn't it? You could be on c6 as well. And this is actually winning for white, because when you go, if you go king e4, king e2, then you drive him back and take the g4 pawn in a while. You have time to take on g4 and h3 and play bishop d4, or something else to stop the pawn if the black king moves to c4. So that was quite important. I mean, he must have been a bit nervous about that as well, Spassky, I imagine. Well, I don't know. So what happened was he actually went there. And this is a drawn position, actually. Black is active enough. Maybe he thought he could play this to win. Fischer, I mean, it looks like you might be able to. You've got a very active king. Takes white a long time to do anything, but it turns out that's a good move, I think, getting the bishop out. What I'm going to do, I once spent a week, possibly a month, analysing this. It was when I was doing my book analysing the endgame. I believe I did reasonably well, but Bob Wade suggested I do it, and it was very interesting, but of course I made mistakes. Everybody made mistakes. And the thing is now, you ask an engine, it just goes beep. It goes from 0 to +4 in one glorious leap. This was given as a mistake by Pacman, but actually perfectly okay. Of course, you don't go b6, takes a5. This wins immediately. b6, keeping the b pawn, otherwise you'd only have the wrong rook's pawn. If you took, then all black would have to do would be to eliminate his 3 pawns for the e-pawn, put his king on a8. So b6 was forced. And this is actually, as Stockfish thunders, the evaluation goes from 0 to more than +4.5. This is the losing blunder, and the reason that the white king is now able to penetrate into the king's side, whereas by keeping the defence f6, g6 after playing e5, black would force white to make too great a concession to get the king in having to try bishop b7. I think that's basically what it is. So they must have adjourned round about here. Byrne gives question mark, but king d5, bishop d4 is winning. Obviously, if the pawns weren't like this, if you could put in f6 and g6, this would be fine for black, but... And the thing is, you simply take the e-pawn and go to c7 with the king. Once the white king gets to c7, it's completely over. I should say the reason this position is difficult, which is that if you... there are some lines. I'm going to go down to the diagram, actually. They got to here. Let's just go straight down the main line to the diagram. It's so complicated. I think here, if you ever play, he's zugging him, a lot of zugging going on. If white had played a5, then black could draw simply by putting his king on c8. White mops up the other pawns, gets his king on e6 and his bishop on d6, and can't do anything except give stalemate or let black move backwards and forwards. There's no way to do anything, and that's why this ending is difficult. But what actually happened was you just go and you bring your king in, and he's in time. He plays king c7, bishop d4, and wins with the b-pawn. Now, just going back to this diagram here, e5 is the correct move. Well, it's one correct move. King g4, g6. This is different because the pawn's in g6. Don't quite understand. I suppose you can go backwards and forwards and get your king over to the queen side quicker. That's right. No, of course you can get an e4, can't you? And he's not. This was given by Pachman, who gave king f2, king takes pawn, e1 takes, king f6, king d2, king e6, king c3, king d6, and you get to c7. But in this position, this is just a draw. If you don't, I mean, bishop a5, pawn equals queen takes, king takes, and you have to sometimes be careful you don't want to get a position king a8, a6, b7 against bishop b3, a5 with black to move, because then black goes b5, pawn takes pawn en passant, a5, b7 mate. Sorry, I'll just do that. S. Okay, what I'm saying is you don't want to have this position eventually here. And this position with black to move is lost, as you can see, because black to move has to go b5 or b6. b5, pawn takes pawn en passant. Okay, that's what I was saying. But you can avoid that. And if you go a5, you just go king to d7 to c8 and draw. So this would have drawn. So basically, a very interesting ending, very, very famous. We never had a definitive version from Fischer with what he was trying to do in game one. He could just have made a draw and then started. Obviously, he changed the psychological balance in some way. He was fighting psychologically as well as on the board, though completely, and that's completely fair. And yeah, he lost it. Spassky won this very famous game. And looking at the ending with an engine is just completely different. Rather than using days or weeks to analyse lines, you just ask it goes ping, and then you say, thank you, sir, now will you tell me why the evaluation has changed, and it gives you a few moves, and you think, okay, that's great. So computers can be very wonderful sometimes. Okay, let's go back to this. As I've just said in here, I'll be back on August the 4th. Please send me any suggestions if you like. Okay, I have been recording, haven't I? Yes, I have, otherwise they'd be screaming, though nobody would hear me scream. I'm going to stop now and see you in a month.